Welcome back to part 2 of this presentation. So how else is our interaction model broken? Well, I think our second key problem here is that we haven't really defined a clear path for completion for the user. A clear path really helps the user progress along, and it gets them started, and it helps the how long until we get there type of questions, right? People have a sense of momentum, and it just doesn't seem like an endless journey that they'll never finish. So with Ancestry.com, our first example, we've got a really great path model here. You start building your family tree with you, and then you go on to your parents and grandparents, and it's really quite straightforward. Now, Cityville's a bit different because as a game it's a lot more open-ended, so what they chose to do was use these mission icons here, and these missions would tell you had a certain goal in mind. It was again small, targeted, and you'd get a reward, and that way they were able to have a little more flexibility and their path there. In both cases, though, there were clear paths to completion, and it seems obvious that the modeling of the steps depends on the structure of the space. But in both cases, short steps that equal quick wins were important, as well as simple steps to reduce user fatigue. So what exactly is our space? Well, I think it's obvious. Our space is the timeline, and I think the key improvement we can make here is we can personalize the timeline by giving it boundaries. Let me give you an example user interaction flow here. So you've just signed up, and the system starts by saying, when were you born? And you say, in my case, 1983. And the system says, here's your timeline. And it's not just an endless timeline in either direction. It's a timeline that's actually my life. It starts with my birth and ends with the end of the current calendar year, ends with now. And from that, the application can extrapolate that in 1983 I was 0, and now I'm 28 years old. And from that even further, the application could extrapolate different periods within, different zones within that timeline, the different stages of school, for example. So what we've done here is we've given the user a really low participation task, and then we've given it a really big result upon completion, and that's really important. Participation level of tasks is crucial. It's so important. If you haven't noticed, I've made the font super big to stress that. So we can think of participation as sort of a sliding scale, with a low participation task being something like changing the channel, whereas a high participation task could go all the way up to something like writing a great novel. So what kind of tasks do we offer? Well, our main task, our primary task, is creating a moment, which is actually a fairly high participation task. Why is it a high participation task? Because one, it's open-ended, which means it can go a lot of different directions, which automatically is scary to a user. Two, it's got a lot of subtasks. Three, it's time-consuming. Within the task of creating a moment, there are some low participation tasks. Things like uploading photos, tagging photos, defining the date. Those are all very simple, straightforward, kind of low participation tasks. We got some a little heavier tasks like defining the title. There's a lot of different titles that we could go, or writing and recording captions. But again, those are fairly straightforward. The hardest by far is writing the story. And I looked at my own moments, and I also looked at Kevin McKim's moments. And of all our moments, we really didn't have any stories, and it's only natural. There's a reason why we didn't have stories. We had lots of photos, lots of photo captions, but no stories, and it's because it's too high of a participation task. So, in our current kind of interaction model, the system says create a moment, and the user creates a moment, this high participation task, and then the system says, oh, here's a single moment on your big empty timeline. Congratulations. And guess what? This is not appealing. This is sort of this makes me wonder, oh my god, was all this time and effort that I put in the moment worth it? I only get one single little moment on a timeline. It's overwhelming. So what we've done is we've given them a high participation task with a very small result. So key next steps, we need to rework our interaction model around two areas: asset acquisition and user achievement. Asset acquisition because A, it was the core of our founder's original vision. B, assets make storytelling easier. C, assets improve retention. And D, assets increase switching costs for our users. Secondly, we've got to get this whole idea of user achievement under our belt. The perceived value of our application is intrinsically tied to the return on participation the software gives. It's the foundation of sustained use, and retained users will eventually lead to monetization. Thank you so much for listening to my presentation. I hope it helped.